Hey, what's going on, everyone? It's your boy Greg Hush Williams. We're here, the PHIner Life Show. We're going to be talking about combating veteran suicide. Usually when we do our shows, I'm very upbeat, but I feel that this is a very serious subject. This needs to be covered just because of, the rising cases around the nation dealing with veteran suicide, as well as, during the pandemic, we have seen a lot of veterans just take matters into their own hands without, seeking professional help. And we here at Mu Beta Phi Military Fraternity Incorporated, we're here to help all those that are in need. We're here to help our fellow brothers and sisters serving in the armed forces. And we have this lovely panel here to not only share medical, experiences and expertise and organizational expertise, but also share stories. All right, so let's get right into the show on combating veteran suicide. And my my panelists. Let me just before I first dive into this, let me first just introduce you to our panel. We have Arnold Astro Train Fester, who is a member of Royal Court New out here in New York City. We also have Imperial Brother Gary Fatal Ammons, who is one of the founders of Mu Beta Phi Military Fraternity Incorporated. We also have joining us Dr. Rudy Melson, and we also do have on the line, boxer extraordinaire and one of our honorary members, Boyd Melson, who is also in the midst of, shooting out a production on suicide and veteran suicide with the Round One movie, which he'll talk about on another show and we've covered. But he's out there also talking about how we can combat this veteran suicide in this pandemic that we do suffer within our own community. So, my first question goes to Dr. Melson. What has been your experience dealing with veteran suicide, and how do you look at it through a medical lens?
So, for clarification, by trade, I'm a doctor of public health, a DRPH, not an MD. However, I suppose I can offer a lens that integrates the perspectives of my colleagues who do, from a medical lens, treat veterans, and from a public health lens, and from the lens of someone who represents veterans on claims and appeals for VA benefits, and helps also a number of veterans who have been deported, whose story is often not told and not included in the statistical analysis that VA provides across many of its subsidiary agencies and across the federal government. This is largely a crisis that is in many ways not as bad as it was. I'd like to say it's becoming mitigated, but in no way, shape, or form should that allow anyone to become complacent in our duties to our veteran community, in that VA and many other federal agencies are spending a tremendous amount of time and resources and energy promoting essentially anti-veteran suicide ideas and programs, but in my view, respectfully, not enough time really establishing guidelines to how that kind of an indoctrination program is going to be infiltrated throughout the VA and the Department of Defense. And so by that, VA has what's called a whole system approach, which is supposed to provide a combination of private and public sector approaches in order to treat the veteran. If you think about a piece of pie or a whole pie, a veteran is at the center of that pie, and every aspect of life that should go into supporting that veteran to make that veteran whole and to keep that veteran balanced and successful in his or her life really is something that ought to begin at the inception of military service. Far too long we've been viewing it as something that is to be looked at the conclusion of service and thereafter. And so we've become smarter, I think, as a system, as a society, And I'm very encouraged by the fact that we are seeing reductions in suicide. This is very much evidenced by uh, the VA's National Veteran Suicide Prevention Annual Report. And the recent report in 2021 speaks to this and demonstrates how there is efficacy to the whole system approach, or as VA calls it, the whole of VA approach to suicide prevention, which integrates the three respective administrations: the Veterans Health Administration, Benefits Administration, and Cemetery Administration. And it really emphasizes the need to create a quintessential strategic partnership of public and private partnerships. But you see, within that, there have to be guidelines established in-house. How does VA deal with this internally? Sociological and anthropological input needs to happen at a much greater speed and at a much greater level than it has been historically. So there's a lot of work to be done, but I am encouraged that it can be done. And I thank you for the question.
All right, and you hit on something that, I'll go to Gary, then I'll go to Boyd because they can speak more upon this. Gary, private-public partnerships with the VA. How do you feel it's beneficial for the VA to partner with nonprofits, and get that holistic, view of the problem and try to, you know, help treat veterans within that whole peer view, and speak to the power of the partnership between the VA and nonprofits if you can.
Sure, no problem with that one. And what I'll simply say, to kind of start off, if you really think about it on a layman's term, the VA already partners with outside sources already. Every time they outsource a referral to a civilian doctor's office or a civilian business, that's a form of a partnership. And so, what I'm going to simply say is that that's an important piece to what the VA does, and how Dr. Melson just said is starting to lower that bell curve in regards to suicide rates and the attention that veterans are receiving, because they have people and they have businesses that they can outreach to, and kind of take that workload and spread it amongst different businesses or clinicians that they may have, that can kind of help with the therapy and the counseling, or whatever important need that a veteran may have during their time of applying for benefits or going to the VA for resources. So it definitely plays a big part. It's kind of evolved over the last, I would say, 10 years, and it's working. It's working at a snail's pace right now, but it is it's moving the curve where it needs to go, in regards to support and the care of veterans.
Right. And you know, uh, you know, here at Mu Beta Phi Military Fraternity Incorporated, we like to pride ourselves on being a brotherhood, and definitely trying to not only just encourage one another in our daily walks as veterans, but try to encourage veterans to seek treatment and to seek help. And Boyd, you actually have experience on the armed forces side where you have been a guest speaker at functions, providing that support to service members and talking about combating suicide. Tell us, not just from a military perspective, but as an advocate, what can people do in their own local communities, and what can businesses do in playing their part in combating veteran suicide?
So I come to this from a position where I'm on an advisory board for the veteran-oriented nonprofit Stop Soldier Suicide. It's not just for soldiers; it's for all veterans. And I also work with another nonprofit named Wounded Combat Veterans of America. And the dynamic they have there seems to be that, as Rudy shared, that there's a pie and the veterans at the center. Those are become arms or slices that are not organic to the VA. And I don't believe partnership may even be the right word. I feel like it's more of a working relationship. And that's with the VA being a cabinet level. And these are nonprofits. I don't know if they're legally allowed to partner, but see, they turn into a referral basis to an extent where the VA will refer or make veterans aware of these organizations. The challenge comes that these organizations, with the services that they provide, that they focus on, the niches they provide, because all of these combat wounded veterans of America have different, one of their things they think, if you've been a combat veteran since 9/11, automatically you deserve a service connection of at least 50%. That's one of their things they're trying to be proponents of that at the legislative level. But the challenge comes that all of these niches that for veteran-oriented niches in the nonprofit world, they get all their funding, most of their funding by public fundraisers. So it's not as if the VA is partnering where they say, we will help fund the niche that you are filling, because we as an organization don't seem to be doing it as well, because we're stressed out across the spectrum, where you have one specific focus that you can do better than the couple of people we have, relatively people dealing with it, versus a whole organization. They don't provide funding to them to handle that. And that would be more of a partnership, where with money allocated and appropriated to the VA annually, they have certain nonprofits that they form agreements with, partnerships with, that they help provide that funding to, almost like outsourcing veteran suicide or outsourcing getting service connected benefits to nonprofits, as opposed to them trying to do it organically, and then through their agreements, them letting veterans know about these nonprofits. But those nonprofits only work because they have to do public fundraising, which is always a challenge. So that's how I see the dynamic is. It could be improved, I think, and I just thought of it in real time here, of them being able to allocate their funds to certain nonprofits that they have assigned and vetted that carry out certain focuses. In the meanwhile, at least with how the system's working, these nonprofits fill this gap, some of the gaps that are out there, and I don't know how they're making themselves known to the VA. They usually have people that work with veterans enough or get in touch with the veteran office in their local region who connect them to the DC level, and then that's how they are made aware. So the VA tells them about these nonprofits. I know at the Brooklyn VA, the chair of the president of the Combat Wounded Veterans of America is an employee at the VA, so that's through networking. But there's no system out there right now providing funding to them and letting them carry out part of the job that the VA should be doing to serve as one of those slices in the pie.
Yeah. And I'll ask this question to you, Astro Train. What are some of the gaps that you feel that are out there within the veteran community when it comes to helping to reinforce individuals and to help strengthen organizations in combating veteran suicide? What are some of the gaps, just as a veteran, that you see out there?
The gap is the stigmatism that we have, in which if you say you have post-traumatic stress disorder or anxiety or a traumatic brain injury, you are held at a lower standard than you normally would if you didn't say anything. And you have to actually stand up and seek help. And a lot of people are not recognizing, or not even a system in place, if you have a traumatic brain injury, that they do a follow-up. And my situation was quite different than most, because I wasn't even inside of a car and I got hit by a drunk driver, and I sustained a traumatic brain injury where the drunk driver hit two cars, and one hit me high, broke both my shoulders, T789, and the other one hit me low and took out my left leg and everything. And my friend died on scene. But in the recovery and even the analysis of it, you're lost, because you go to a dark place that most people don't even know exists, and you smile or you put on this facade that everything is okay, and it really isn't. And for me, there was an empty void there, because I couldn't even think like I used to. It's like my brain shut down, and I would see people, and I had no short or long-term memory in which to draw back on or to say anything. So me and my son was driving one day, and I went into Taco Bell, and tried to place an order and found myself feeling overwhelmed and started stuttering because I had a speech impediment when I was younger, and then I had throat surgery and overcame it. But when I had this accident, it came back. And it's funny how, the life is a cycle like that. But my son got mad and started screaming at the guy, like, why you, messing with my dad? And I looked at my son, and I went to a dark place after that. I stopped going out. I stopped uh, doing the things I used to do. And people don't know, but when you stay in bed or you shut yourself in or you don't have any light, that's a form of depression. And you need to seek help and counsel so that people can try to bring you, what they say, back to the light. And it's a trying and a traumatic situation because sometimes you can fake it. You could talk to people and you could tell them what they want to hear, but inside you're feeling something different, And I can remember the first time I felt it, it was not even, I was at the peak of my career in my life. And my wife woke up and said she didn't want to be married anymore. And I was like, you don't want to be married anymore? Like, well, you go away and you deploy and, it's like everything is going good. Why am I having stress in my life? And, you're deploying, you're doing things, you paying the bills, you're getting things you never had, and you're traveling and trying to make the whole family whole. But a lot of times the wives don't feel like the husbands are doing what they're supposed to do. And that's a lot of that is people are not communicating when they get in relationships that I have to deploy. And what's your feelings and your communication? Because today we have technology of this phone and this Zoom, but before we didn't have cellular phones and we didn't have Zoom, and we had family grams, and you were only allowed to get 3 a month. And that was like an email sent to the boat through satcom. So while we're moving forward, the big thing that I would say is that veterans feel like they're on an island by themselves. I've served my country, I've given everything, and I'm lost. Like nobody's hearing me, nobody's recognizing me, nobody's talking to me, nobody's communicating, nobody's understanding me. So when you feel that way, you say, I've done all I could do. Maybe my my absence is better than my presence. Maybe everybody's just, not understanding or communicating with me. And that's the point where you need to seek help. And you need to be able to recognize that things are not as they appear to be anymore. And I had to go see a psychiatrist, and it was a stigma for a little while that maybe you're crazy or something's going on. So when you talk to them, really, it's like it takes a whole village to raise us. And at one time, we used to help each other. And in that village, anybody could chastise, anybody can groom you, anybody can compliment you and help you. And today, everybody's gone to a separate realm. And especially during this pandemic, people are not paying their bills, people are not getting their money, people are not eating. I mean, there's a lot of stress and a lot of pressure, and people don't know what to do. And they have to know that there are resources out there. And that's why I joined Mu Beta Phi, because uh, I wanted to not only eradicate homelessness, but I wanted to help veterans, and I'm also a Mason. And in that Mason realm, in my consistory, I'm the volunteer Veterans Committee advisory guy. And I chose that because I felt being the youngest guy on a committee, and I'm 57, that the information was not properly disseminated. So I said, how do I make a difference? I mean, you can cry about it or you can stand up. And in recruiting, it says if it's to be, it's up to me. So I have to stand in the gap and bridge that gap, not only between my sons, but their friends and my colleagues and my friends and my associates, so that we reach out to each other and we're helping each other. And I had to call Gary the other day because I was feeling a little bit lost and anxious. And he said, bro, call and talk to somebody. And I called my psychiatrist and he said, how are you doing? And I penned a letter and I called it an open letter on Facebook because I sent something to my sons because I was raised by a single parent and my father passed away when I was 4 years old. But the reason I penned a letter is because I spoiled my 3 sons and I'm the youngest of 10, 3 years after high school. And I forgot my teachings. My mom passed away 5 years ago, and I was feeling a void, and I went into like a depression because they say, "Well, how do you keep them alive?" And a lot of it's you start reminiscing, and it takes you to a place where you have to communicate that with people who are feeling that with you, but you can't stay there. You know, it's like a snapshot. You can remember the pictures, but you got to talk about it and move on.
Mhm.
And that's where people need friends and they need fellowships and they need brothers in arms and they need each other. Yeah. And even now with the pandemic, everybody says, oh, I'm gonna be away from people. And the greatest thing is this Zoom. You can have a Zoom party. You can talk to everybody everywhere. But I feel that this pandemic has been a blessing because it brings us back to the 80s and the 90s where you had to be around your family and you played board games and you communicated and you talked and you were real about what you were doing. And for some
Y-
people, they hide behind their phones or they hide in their corners. And for me, I thrive in that because being the youngest of 10, there was 9, 10 other people, if not more than that, feeding into me. So now that I'm heard, and before I wasn't, and now that I'm heard, I have to make sure that I'm vocalizing or getting my point across or bridging the gap with my kids or my nephews or and I could have easily fell in a darker place because I'm freshly married last year and my wife's sister was sick and we did hospice. And however you want to take it, fortunate or unfortunate, she passed away in March and we stepped up and adopted her 2 children. One is 18 and one is 5. And it's quite a tasking when both of their parents uh, the mother died, so both of the fathers are alive, but they're both unfortunately pedophiles.
Oh
And
wow.
their
So
children,
Astro Chain, let me get Dr. Melson here because you hit a lot of points um that I think from a public health perspective, I would really love to gain your insight, Dr. Melson. You know, when you're listening to veterans talk about their personal experience and you hear dark place, you know, and you hear how they describe that experience, you know, what is, I don't want to say, you know, hey, what is the prescription? But what goes through your head as a medical professional, and how do you look to treat, you know, these kinds of feelings within that sector of public health?
So public health looks at a variety of different elements that, in essence, when you're looking at the total person, the biopsychosocial uh, trio, if you will, it looks at determinants that go into the population that you're discussing, which in this case, our veterans, our nation's heroes. And it also discusses and looks at the individual as well. It didn't always do that. Public health, depending on which side of it you're looking at. Some people like to look at the individual and extrapolate out, and most conventional public health measures look at the population and go inward. I think it's very important to understand that there's a tremendous amount of, everybody wants to do something. This entity has an idea of how to reduce veteran suicide. This individual has an idea. This group exists. That group exists. And it can't be understated enough that we see reduction in suicide. We see reduction in the need for healthcare service, for healthcare utilization, the need for it. We see reduction of that when there is more of an engendering and more of an enterprising and an inclusion of people in group settings, much like the fraternity that you represent. We see the benefits of that are just so very important. We also see how suicide among veterans can be, for example, increased when it comes to barriers to access in care. As an example, in 2019, among the average 17.2 veteran suicides per day, approximately 6.8 suicides a day were among those who had received some kind of care at a VA facility, be it a VA hospital or clinic. Okay. And that was measured in 2018 and in 2019. And something like 10.4 compared to 17.2 per day were among veterans who didn't have any opportunity to receive care at a VA hospital or clinic in 2018 and 2019. That's substantial. That's almost a 50% reduction in suicide measured in 2018 and 2019 among veterans on a daily basis. 6.8 suicides per day for those people who are among those people rather who are taking advantage of healthcare services from the Veterans Health Administration compared to 10.4 who are not. It's important as well to not just look at specific indices that VA is looking at. They've got to look at more. I'm a big proponent of the fact that we need to look at a variety of things. I'll just give you as an example, one of the areas of specialization that I have. I'm interested in the public health metrics that deal with veterans who decide that they don't want to live in the United States after they're done with military service. You serve a country that you're very honored to wear the uniform up to represent. Why wouldn't you want to stay in that country and enjoy your benefits and enjoy living among your fellow Americans that you served, either directly or indirectly, but you served because you served in uniform voluntarily in our nation's military. And what would come about for you to have to leave? And who's capturing the data if for veterans who commit suicide who live overseas? That data is very much confounding the truth behind the metrics that exist. We have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of veterans who live overseas and are not accurately captured in the metrics that VA is aware of. And this is a big problem. And a good amount of that, not just suicidal death, but let's just call it preventable death, exists among veterans who have been deported, who came into this country, who were not provided a legal path to come here. Many of them dreamers, and came here and saw military service as an option to earn their citizenship. And what more of an honorable way for one to do so? And they get in trouble, and then our country boots them out. And even though the Biden administration has indicated that the departments of Homeland Security and State and Veterans Affairs will begin to repatriate them and their immediate family members, it's not happening fast enough. And so that's also an element of discussion that needs to be included. And so I think that there's a good amount of credence in leadership by example, and our government has the tools and the resources to effectuate change at a cabinet level, at an executive level, at a legislative level, and certainly in a judicial level. And if we do that, we can create more resources that can be incorporated by the respective private sector entities and public sector entities at the state and county and city and other local levels that can espouse change and help incentivize and allocate funding and other resources needed in order to capture the let's call it outliers. The previous gentleman that had just spoken here discussed something very important, and that is there's a tremendous amount of reticence, a stigma. They don't want to get help. And suddenly help renders you vulnerable when you've just served in a military service where the very notion that you have some kind of mental weakness is something that would compromise mission integrity and make you any less of a Marine or a sailor or a soldier or an airman or a coastie or a member of the Coast Guard. It's simply not the case. There's strength in admitting fear. There's strength in identifying weakness. And there's, in my view, honor in facing oneself and doing something about that weakness. You honor yourself, and you cannot possibly honor your potential to serve this country or the larger world unless you are in balance with yourself. You just can't, at least not in an optimal way. So I hope that there will be more action at the federal level to centralize the enormity of efforts to treat the veteran's biology, psychology, and sociology, and spirituality for that matter, and to espouse programs that balance all four of those very important dimensions. And again, it's important to not look at it as a veteran matter. It is very much a service member matter as well, and it needs to be engendered before probably at the very beginning of someone's military career. And I truly believe if intervention at that point can begin, we will see even greater reductions in these numbers of suicides when the service member transitions from service member to veteran.
And then that leads me to this question, which I hope Imperial Brother Fatal is ready to tackle, because this is, I guess, the big $1 million question. As Dr. Melson put it, there has to be some sort of way to not just wholly depend on the federal system. Those 4 dimensions. I didn't even think there were 4 dimensions, Dr. Melson. I was, as a veteran, I'm like tracking 2 maybe. Let's get straight to the point, Gary. Mu Beta Phi, how do organizations offset, these veteran suicide? How do we open up that outlet and become our brothers and our sisters keepers?
Sure. For Mu Beta Phi, since inception of the organization, this has been one of our 2 major national programs. Our Herculean Effort program is there to kind of help in this area. Even when we go out on our recruit and push, we look for brothers that have some kind of skill set that can help in the Herculean Effort program. Whether it's substance abuse, obviously mental health issues and things of that matter. And so when we bring brothers into the organization, they come with a skill set that may be licensed as a clinician that can help with, therapy or, counseling services and things of that nature. So it's been productive over the last 5 years. We've had, of course, we did just lose one of our primary members of the Herculean Effort program. He just recently became deceased. But we do have clinicians here that do help with substance abuse, the mental health piece, and it has worked over the last 5 years through counseling. And even if it gotten too far out of the scope of that brother, we were able to bring them to the doors of the VA to get the help that they needed, that they themselves did not even know was available to them as veterans. So on a level at that peak, that's kind of like where we help at. And we continue to push that initiative, and we open the doors not just to veterans or to members of the organization, but to any and everyone that may need help. And we have a private line that they can dial into, and most of them are kept under confidentiality policy. So it works. It's a positive attribute to an organization, I just, I would hope that more would reach out before it gets too far out of scope that we can't do anything, but we do our best to try to help anyone that comes to our doors.
Right. And it's a beautiful thing to be a part of a organization where you can lean on one another. This has been our show on combating veteran suicide. Thank you so much, Dr. Melson, for giving us that public health outlook. Thank you so much, Imperial Brother Fatal, for being on the show and just giving outlook from an organizational perspective. And thank you so much, Arnold Astral Train Fester, for sharing your story as a veteran. Oftentimes it's very hard to share stories because, you don't want others you want to share your story, but you don't want others to judge you. And this is a judge-free zone. We don't judge one another. We're here to uplift one another. And thank you all for participating. Listen, everybody, log on to www.mbphikings2017.org just to read more up on us or just to follow us on the web. Once again, that is www.mbphikings2017.org. Of course, Dr. Melson, consulting vets throughout the website. What is it?
www.consultvets.com.
All right, I just put it in there. It just magically appears on there. All right, that's what I make it do. All right, thank you all for joining the PHIner Life Show. This is your boy, Brother Hush. Till the next episode, peace.